Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Islamic Economics series. Today, we're going to break down one of the most influential and, let's be honest, controversial essays in 20th century economics. We're talking about Milton Friedman's The Methodology of Positive Economics. Now, really getting to grips with this work is absolutely essential for any serious scholar, especially for those of us trying to build robust alternatives, like Islamic economics. I mean, you've got to understand the architecture of the building you're in before you can design a new one, right?
So, right off the bat, Friedman hits us with this. It's a startling claim. It almost sounds like a contradiction. He's basically saying that the very best, most important theories are built on assumptions that are, well, just plain false. This is the absolute core of his argument, and it just turns our natural intuition about what makes a good model completely on its head. It feels wrong, doesn't it? But it's an incredibly powerful idea. Okay, let's get into it.
So, to really understand this wild idea, we can't just jump into the middle of it. We have to start where Friedman starts, with a really fundamental distinction that basically holds up his entire philosophy of economics.
What Friedman does, building on the work of philosophers like John Neville Keynes, is insist on this razor-sharp separation between two different kinds of economic thinking. And for him, look, this isn't just some academic exercise of putting things in boxes. No. This is about protecting the scientific integrity of economics itself.
And here's the split: positive versus normative economics. Positive economics is all about what is. It aims to be an objective science, making claims that you can, at least in theory, test with data. So a statement like, raising the minimum wage will increase unemployment. That's a positive statement. It might be right, it might be wrong, but we can go out and test it. Normative economics, on the other hand, is about what ought to be. A statement like, we should raise the minimum wage. Well, that's a normative statement. It's based on values, on ethics, and here's the crucial point. Friedman's entire goal is to establish economics as a purely positive science, something that operates just like physics.
So, if you're laser-focused on making economics into a hard science, what does that actually mean for the theories you build? Well, it leads you directly to what Friedman sees as the one and only purpose of any scientific theory. In Friedman's world, a theory is just a tool. That's it. It's an engine for making predictions. Think about a hammer. You don't judge a hammer on whether it's beautiful or elegant, right? You judge it on one thing. Does it drive a nail? For Friedman, a theory is exactly the same. Its only measure of value is its power to predict. It is not, and it was never supposed to be, a perfect high-resolution photograph of reality.
So how do you test this tool? The process seems pretty straightforward, right? You come up with a hypothesis, you figure out what it predicts, and you go check those predictions against what really happens. If they match up, you keep the hypothesis. If they don't, you throw it out. But, and this is the really interesting part, look closely at what's missing from this list. There is no step that says, check if the theory's assumptions are realistic. It's just not part of the test. The only thing that matters is the result, the prediction.
And this brings us right back around to that bombshell quote from the beginning. How on earth can wildly inaccurate assumptions lead to a good theory? Well, Friedman uses a couple of brilliant examples to make his logic crystal clear, and he starts with a classic from physics.
Okay, so let's think about the law of falling bodies. The formula S equals 1/2 gt squared. We've all seen it. Now, this formula is built on the core assumption that the object is falling in a perfect vacuum. But I mean, look around. We are clearly not in a vacuum. That assumption is factually wrong. And yet, if I drop a heavy bowling ball from a building, that formula will predict its fall time with incredible accuracy. But what if I drop a feather instead? Well, then the formula is totally useless. The prediction is wildly wrong.
And that's Friedman's whole point in a nutshell. The theory, built on a totally unrealistic assumption, works perfectly for the bowling ball but fails for the feather. So, is the assumption of a vacuum realistic? Who cares? That's the wrong question. The only question that matters is, does the theory give us accurate enough predictions for the specific job we're doing? It's all about using the right tool for the job. Okay, so that's physics. Let's see how this logic applies to people.
All right, new problem. How can we predict the shots of an expert billiard player?
So Friedman comes up with a hypothesis. We can get great predictions by assuming the player makes his shots as if he were a master physicist, calculating all the complex formulas, angles, and velocities in his head. Now, if you actually ask the player, he'd probably laugh. He'd say it's all about feel and instinct. But that doesn't matter. We have confidence in our hypothesis not because we actually believe the player is a mathematician, but because the hypothesis works. Think about it. If he wasn't somehow getting the same results that the formulas would predict, well, then he wouldn't be an expert in the first place.
This as-if reasoning, this is
the master key. It's the central idea behind Friedman's whole defense of mainstream neoclassical economic theory. And the big hypothesis he's defending with this logic is this one: the idea that firms in the real world behave as if they were perfectly rational agents, all trying to maximize their profits.
Now, critics jump all over this. They say that's completely unrealistic. CEOs don't sit around calculating marginal cost and marginal revenue. And Friedman's response is, essentially, you're missing the point. That's like criticizing the billiard player theory because he doesn't own a calculator. The real justification for the theory, he argues, is a kind of market natural selection. Sure, businesses act for all sorts of reasons: habit, luck, gut feelings. But the firms that happen to act in ways that are consistent with maximizing returns, those are the ones that survive and grow. The ones that don't, they lose money and disappear. So the theory works, not because it describes a manager's thought process, but because it correctly predicts the behavior of the firms that actually survive in the marketplace.
Which brings us back to this incredible quote. A theory's true power lies in its simplicity, its ability to extract away from the messy details of reality, to isolate the few things that really matter. You know, a map that was perfectly realistic, a one-to-one scale map of the world, would be the size of the world. It would be completely useless. A map is useful precisely because it's unrealistic. A good theory, Friedman says, is exactly the same. Its power comes from the fact that it is descriptively false in its assumptions.
And so this is the critical question that Friedman leaves us with. If predictive power is the only thing that matters, where do we draw the line between a useful simplification and a dangerous fiction? For us, as researchers in Islamic economics, this is a central debate. Do we adopt this Friedman-esque approach and argue that our models should be judged only by their predictive power, or do we insist that the realism of our assumptions about human nature, about social justice, about ethical behavior is a vital test of a theory's validity all by itself? Friedman's essay doesn't give us the answer, but it forces us to ask the right questions with real clarity. See you in the next one. Subscribe, like, and comment.